Hello friends, Tiffany Dawn here and welcome back to our Tuesday Girl Talk. And today we're going to talk about how do you know what God's will is for your life. But first I just have to take a minute and say happy Fireworks Day on 4th of July. If you're here in America like I am, today is our National Independence Day celebration. So if you also live in America, what are you doing to celebrate? And if you don't live in the US, I would love to hear what your country's huge national celebration day is and when it is. Also, I just have to say, girls, we just reached 1,000 subscribers this weekend. What? That's crazy. I'm so excited that all of you have joined our community here, and I just love having you as part of it and hearing from you, and it makes me so happy. So thank you for sharing this with me. We'll be doing a giveaway soon to celebrate, so keep your eye out for that. And now for the real purpose of this video. So a bunch of you have written in about how do I know what God's will is for my life. So let's talk about it. Okay, so I was the kind of girl who, when I was growing up, I was so scared, paralyzed by fear of making the wrong decision. I mean, it was so intense that I'd be driving to school and I'd have 2 different roads I could take, and I'd be like, I don't know which route to take. What if I take the wrong one and I end up in a car accident? Or I take the wrong one and I can't help somebody on the side of the road. So I come from that background of this fear that I'm gonna make the wrong decision and miss God's will for my life. But what God started teaching me was that He wants me to follow Him even more than I want to follow Him. And so I can trust that as long as my heart is open to His guiding, He will lead me. And He will stop me from making any decisions that He doesn't want me to make. And sometimes that's even through rejection, like not getting a job I applied for, or a guy not being interested, or not getting into a certain college. And then I started realizing there are a lot of times when God gives us choices to make, where it's not this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It's here you go. Which way do you want to go? It reminds me of this verse in Isaiah 30 verse 21 that says, when you turn to the right or to the left, you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And I love that because it's you make the turn and then the voice comes from behind and is yep, good choice. I remember in college having the opportunity to go on this missions trip to Costa Rica, and I had no idea if I should go or not. I was praying about it, and I didn't hear anything. So eventually I was well, I guess I'll go. And it turns out that God really used that trip. That was the first time I shared my story, which eventually became the Insatiable Quest for Beauty. But it wasn't God was go to Costa Rica. He would have eventually brought me into sharing my story, whether I went or whether I didn't go. But He let me make that choice, and He used that choice. There's this parable of the talents in Matthew 25, I think, where Jesus tells a story. This man gives out a certain amount of money to 3 different servants. So to the first servant he gives 5 coins, the next servant 3 coins, the next servant 1 coin. The man goes on a trip, comes back and says, so what'd you do with the money I gave you? And the first 2 had invested it in some way and made a profit for the guy. And he was well done, I'm gonna give you even more. But the last guy said, I was just scared. You didn't tell me what to do with the coin, and so I just hid it in the ground. And the master's seriously? You didn't at least put it in a bank so I could make some interest on it? And I always thought that was so unfair. I'm well, dude, you didn't tell the guy what to do with your money. He has a right to be too scared to do anything. Then I started learning God gives us a lot of things that He doesn't tell us specifically what to do with. Our interests, our talents, the money we have, the time we have. We're supposed to do something with those things, but God doesn't always spell it out for us. It's just here you are. What are you gonna do with it? Think, what would honor God? And then what does God put in my heart to do? And kind of make a choice. And a lot of the time, I think God guides us through the interests He has put in our hearts. There's certain things that just come so naturally to you. It's almost like breathing. You don't even realize it's a gift from God because it's just what you love doing, and it seems everybody must feel that way. There's this quote I think it's by Howard Thurman, that says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think there's a lot of truth to that quote, because in the Bible it talks about God giving us each gifts. And I think a lot of the times when God gives us a gift, it feels so natural we don't even realize it's a gift. In my own life, one of my gifts is vulnerability. Being willing to be yeah, my life will be an open book, cool. And it feels so natural, it's weird to me that not everybody's like that, I just thought everybody was like that because it's just like who I am. Or like I love writing. And I was like, oh, there's people who don't like writing? Really? I just thought everybody liked writing this much. So a lot of times you gotta step back for a minute and just look at your life and say, okay, what are the things that come as naturally to me as breathing? And he's gonna use those things to direct you into what he has for you. Actually, one of you wrote in, where's my phone? Anna said, I've had a career goal in mind for a while, but now I'm stressing over the thought that maybe it's my idea for my life and not God's idea. But I think a lot of times that really God does guide us through things he has put in us. That very well may be that God put those interests and those passions in your heart. And so you think this is your idea, but maybe it's actually an idea he gave you. And a lot of times, like for my husband, for my mom, for a lot of my friends, they don't have anything in specific that they feel like God has said, do this with your life. But they have all these gifts and these interests and these passions that God has given them. And as they pursue those things, I really believe they're walking in what God has given them to do. But here's the biggest thing I've learned is that our primary calling is to love God and love other people. Jesus said that that's the first and greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. That is the primary thing God asks each of us to do. And anything else he gives us to do, whether that's missions work, being a teacher, being a mom, being a doctor, anything else is secondary to that primary calling. And I remember when I started traveling and speaking, and I was like, wow, God, this is so cool. Like, we're speaking at all these events together, and I'm hearing from these girls, and you're working in their hearts. And I felt like God led me to this verse in Luke 10, verse 17, where he sends out 72 people to preach the gospel around Israel, and they come back, and they're like, God, even the demons submitted to us in your name. Jesus is like, yeah, I saw Satan fall from heaven. I've given you authority, but do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And I felt like God started speaking that to me like, yeah, it's really cool what's happening, but the greatest miracle of all is that you are mine. And I started realizing that God is more concerned with my heart than he is with anything that I'm doing for him. Another of you wrote in this awesome question on Instagram, how did you have the courage to just move on and do what God's calling you to do? I feel like God is calling me to be a missionary, but I just don't have the courage to move away from all this. Like, I'm nearly getting my degree now, and to just put that away and go to missions? So I think a lot of the times God will put things on our hearts and we think like this is for right now. And sometimes it is. Like, I do have this one friend who God put on her heart to leave in the middle of college and go be a missionary. She and her husband and their kids are still missionaries 10 years later, and that was totally what she was meant to do. But I think a lot of the time God calls us to finish the season we're in. Sometimes he'll put things in our heart for the future and it's not time for them yet. At least in my own life, when God called me to do things like quit my job and start traveling and speaking full time, like, it was a time that made sense. I was like, I finished my master's degree. I had finished my first book. It was in a season, a part of my job where it would make sense to quit. And so there are times when God calls us to do things that don't make sense, but I think sometimes they fit into the season that we're in. I guess, like, personally, I'm a big fan of like getting some kind of education, whether it's college or vocational or training or whatever, but some way that you have a skill that you can then take with you when you're a missionary, or like a way that you can even help support yourself if need be. I think that that's huge. And also, I know a lot of people who felt like God called them to be missionaries, and they'd feel that calling like years before it was actually time for them to go. And sometimes they'd be like, well, let me quit my job and sell my house and do this and that, and then they're just like waiting for years. I think the best thing you can do probably is talk with people you trust about it. Like, find some mentors or your parents, someone who is an adult who loves God, has a lot of wisdom, and just say, what do you think? Is this something that I should do right now? Or is this something that I should do down the road? Seek God about it and seek wise counsel. The book of Proverbs says that in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And I know whenever I've made big decisions, like when I decided to quit my job and travel and speak full time, I talked to my pastors, my mentors, my parents. Every time they're like, yeah, this is crazy, but we are 100% behind you. This is absolutely what God has for you to do right now. And that just gave me a lot of courage to be like, okay, yeah, this is right. This is what I'm meant to do. So I would encourage you to talk with people too and see what they think. And I also personally, I didn't just go into it blindly. Like, I was like, okay, I'm quitting my job, my 401k, my apartment, like I still have loans to pay. So I talked with my parents. I was like, so how much do we charge for events? Where can I stay? How can I stay with family and friends in the different places so I don't have to be paying for hotels? Like, we talked about that practical side of it, and it was able to work practically too. And I think that's part of making a wise choice. Like, there are times when God calls us to do something that seems like totally nuts and like it could never work, but I think a lot of the time we're called to make wise choices too, and not just ignore the practical side. And then the Queen Marshmallow wrote in and said, how do you know when God is guiding you or when it's just random time and circumstance? I think sometimes God does guide us through what seems to be just random time and circumstance. The book of Ecclesiastes says time and chance happen to them all. Like I said, there's a lot of decisions we just make, and so things will happen that God allows in our lives, and we don't necessarily see how it's all going to be woven together, but through the years, God directs us on our path through those things. And I think sometimes, at least if you're like me, it's easy to be afraid of missing out on what God has for you. Like, if I make the wrong choice, if something happens and I don't do it right, I'm gonna miss out on what God has. I'm gonna miss my future husband. I'm gonna miss my calling or my career. It's really important to remember just how huge God is. And I really believe that as long as our hearts are open to Him and His guidance and following Him, we don't have anything to fear. So if you want to know how to know what God's will is for your life, the best thing you can do is spend time with God, getting to know Him more, because He's the one who made you. He knows what His plan is for your life. Talk with wise people that you trust, and then do what God puts in your heart to do, and do it in a way that loves God and loves others. And it may be that you never really even realize where He's directing you until you get there. That's okay. As long as we are open to Him, we have nothing to fear. So those are some things that have helped me, and I hope that they can really encourage you guys too. And as always, comment below your thoughts on this question. What has helped you figure out what God has for you? So thanks for being with me, and I will see you all on Friday. Love you girls. Bye.